Right. Come back to our discussion. Right. So, like we are going to start today, advanced.net. There we are going to start OOPS in C#.net. Are you getting my voice, all of you? Right. Right. Are you getting my voice? Respond in chat window, all of you. Are you getting my voice? Right. Hello. Are you able to listen my voice? Yeah. Okay. So actually, in .NET fundamentals, we are learning C#.net up to loops, and in advanced paid course we are starting from OOPS in C#.net, and once it is completed and OOPS in C#.net, here the topics will be like this. After this, exception handling. After OOPS will take around 20 hours. Next, exception handling. Next, delegates. Next, multi-threading. I'm telling you topics. Multi-threading. Next, what is this? Multi-threading. Next, indexer. Next, enumerator. Next, assemblies. Nothing but class libraries. Structures. Indexer, exception handling, delegates, and multi-threading, and indexer, enumerator, assemblies, structures. Okay, maybe one or two topics here and there will be there. So this is the story. Total C# OOPS will take 20 hours. Remaining all these topics will take 20 hours. Around 40 hours syllabus only C#.net. Once C#.net is over, we'll start ASP.net and ADO.net. There we will develop web applications using ASP.net, ADO.net, and ASP.net also will use a language called C#. And once end of this course, we'll develop one website, real-time project. Okay, and we'll provide C#.net step-by-step book notes soft copy, ASP.net step-by-step notes soft copy, and interview question bank soft copy. Like that, 4-5 materials will be shared to you. Right. Once you will attend this my C# and ASP, you are masters in almost.net. Let's start our class today. Right. So what is OOPS? Any idea? OOPS stands for what? What is OOPS? Right. Come back to our discussion. Come and tell me what is OOPS. In chat window, I'm expecting some answers from you. Come on, fast, all of you. OOPS stands for Object Oriented Programming System. Object Oriented Programming System. So before we are going to start OOPS, we need to understand about programming approaches. Programming approaches are two types. Already I discussed this in introduction also. So in introduction of .NET classes, I've explained. Programming approaches are two types. Any idea what are they? Any idea what are they? Fast. Programming approaches are two types. Any idea what are they? Any idea what are they? Fast, all of you respond in chat window. I have explained this in .NET introduction, as well as I have explained in advanced Python also. Right, listen here. And programming approaches are two types. I said very clearly. They are number one, procedural oriented programming approach. Programming approach. Don't get confused. First 2 to 3 days, you will have pure theory concepts. Number one, procedural oriented programming approach. Number two is called object oriented programming approach. Object oriented programming approach. Programming approaches are two types. Number one, procedural oriented approach. Number two, object oriented programming approach. Then what is procedural oriented programming approach? First, let's understand. Okay, what is this? In procedural oriented programming approach, in procedural oriented programming approach, in procedural oriented programming approach, procedural oriented programming approach, program is a collection of procedures or functions or methods. Means, what is the meaning of this? In this approach, whenever you write a program, that program will contain collection of procedures or functions, and a procedure, function, method, same, nothing else. Means here you don't have a concept called class. So did you understand about this, all of you? Did you understand about this, all of you? First, did you understand? Because first 2 to 3 days OOPS introduction classes are very important. There is a chance it is complete theory. Once you understood all these concepts, you should go for OOPS programming. To do OOPS programming, first we need to have the OOPS basics. And one more thing is OOPS is very interesting, And OOPS is the backbone of the developer today in the industry. Complete today industry law, every software course, software platform, software languages, all are object-oriented programming languages, all are object-oriented programming technologies, all are object-oriented programming platforms. That is the reason for fresher to manager level personnel. So whenever you are attending interview, they will check your OOPS knowledge. So OOPS, I told you now, 20-25 hours OOPS will take in our classes. So don't get bored, because if you are strong in OOPS, job when you are attending tomorrow after .NET course is completed also, your interview 60 to 70% is OOPS only. 60 to 70% OOPS only. And coming 1 to 2 months low, I will show you 30 to 50 offers from the old batch students who got, and will maybe if I possible, I'll show you the people who got jobs in .NET last couple of years. Thousands of students list also I have, in which company they are working. So I used to tell to the students, learn C language to understand programming, and learn Python because it's a future programming language. Tomorrow, if you join in company, if they will, after 2-3 years, you should work for data science. You should work for artificial intelligence. Data science and artificial intelligence, they will use a language called what? Python. For that reason, I used to say, learn Python. Learn Python for two reasons. One is easy language, easy coding language. Second is future language. But immediate job, if you want to get for freshers, .NET is the best and ultimate, no doubt about that. Right. Now come back to our discussion. Are you clear? What is procedural oriented programming approach? I said in procedural oriented programming approach, program is a collection of procedures, functions or methods. Functions or methods. Right. Right. Over. Next point is, yeah, procedures, functions or methods. Right. Over. Now let's write structure of procedural oriented programming approach. Structure of procedural oriented programming approach means procedural oriented programming approach law. What is the programming structure? Structure will be, how will be the structure? You can see I will write a function called M1. This is M1. Here it will have logic. Here another function called M2. I said it's a collection of functions, logic. And here you will have a function called main. Here you will have a function called main. And main, what is the importance of main, sir? You can ask. Babu, total this, right now this structure, this program contain how many functions? Total this program contain how many functions right now? Come on. It contain how many functions right now? Total it contains how many functions? 3 functions. Okay now. First function is what? What is the first function name? What is the 3 functions we have? No doubt. First function name M1. Second function name is M2. Third function name is main. Then you can ask me what is the role of main, sir? And when you run this code, your execution engine will start the execution from main method. Execution from main method. That is the reason this is called M1 definition, M2 definition, main definition. Within the main, we call M1. You will call M1. Next, you call M2 like this. Okay now. So that's it. So now how this program will execute, sir? In this approach, how this code will execute, sir? You can ask me. Are you clear? Try to understand. Whenever you run this application, what will happen? Your execution engine will start from the main method. Execution engine ingestion, what it will do? Main, where are you? Then main will say, I'm here, boss. Then it will start. Then it will execute M1. Here control will call the M1 method. Okay, control will go to M1 and will execute. And once it is encountered, closing brace and will come back. After this, control will execute, call M2. Here it will go to M2, will execute M2, and once it is encountered closing brace, it will come back. Once it is encountered the closing brace of the main method, then it will understand program execution is completed. Then it will understand program execution is completed. Execution is completed. So that is the story about procedural oriented programming approach. Did you understand procedural oriented programming approach? Right. Did you understand procedural oriented programming approach? Right. A programming language, listen, a programming language which will follow above programming approach, which is called as procedural oriented programming language, which is called as procedural oriented programming language. Example for procedural oriented programming language. Example for procedural oriented programming language. So C language. Example for procedural oriented language is a C language. C language will follow the above approach. That's why C is called procedural oriented. Whenever you write the program in C, you can see C programming environment here. So every day we are writing program in C file. I am just opening my old code. One example, test.c program. You can see you will have main method. And again, here you can define some functions and you can call. So that is the story, right? Everybody are clear. This is C code actually, right? So it doesn't have any, what do you know? It doesn't have any, what you can classes, all these things, right? Did you understand all of you? So now, so C is called procedural oriented programming language. Now come back to our discussion. Here one important point is due to some limitations in this programming approach, industry experts introduced a new programming approach which is called as object-oriented Object-oriented programming approach. Object-oriented programming approach. A new programming approach which is called as object-oriented programming approach. Okay, industry experts are introduced. Now we will try to understand what is object-oriented programming approach, sir. And ask me, what is object-oriented programming approach? So let me send you the notes up to here in chart window, but actually chart window will have some limitation. Okay, some limitation. Okay, right. That's the reason some nodes, sometimes some nodes will cut here. You know, right. So now we are going for next object-oriented programming approach. Now, can you answer for this question? What is object-oriented programming approach? Can you give me the answer for this question? What is object-oriented programming approach? What is object-oriented programming approach? What is object-oriented programming approach? First, what is object-oriented programming approach? What is object-oriented programming approach? All of you guys, come on. Any idea? You have to write the answer, boss. What you are doing? I'm wondering about you guys. Not responding. Not responding. All of you guys, come on. Right, come on, fast. Right, fast. All of you. Come on, respond. Right, fast. Okay, what is object-oriented programming approach? Listen. Coming to object-oriented programming approach, what is this approach? Listen. Yeah. In object-oriented programming approach, program is a collection of an object-oriented programming approach. Program is a collection of classes. Collection of classes. And whenever you write a program in object-oriented approach, that complete program is a collection of classes. Now, structure of object-oriented programming approach. Structure of object-oriented programming approach. Class C1, M1, M1, M2, 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 right? So right now what happened? I have defined one class. So the name of the class is C1. Here class is a keyword. This is a class block. Here I defined two methods. Means whenever you write a method here, a function, compulsory, it should be within the class. Should be within the class. That is the story. It should be within the class. Right. Next, right. Class C2, and within the C2 will have a main method. Main. Here same story. Here also you will have main method. And whenever you want to call M1 method, you write C1 dot M1 C1 dot M2, C1 dot M2, C1 dot M1, C1 dot M2, like this. Observe this. Come back to our discussion. You can see what is this? How many classes you have in your program? How many classes you have in your program? How many classes you have in your program? Right now you have how many classes? How many classes? Two classes, C1 and C2. C1 class contain how many methods? C1 class contain how many methods? Two methods, M1 and M2. C2 class contain which method? C2 class contain which method? C2 class contain which method? What is the method for C2 class? C2 class, what is the method? Main method. Main method, right. So that is the story here. Are you clear? C2 class contain a method called main. Getting my point? So now how this program will execute, sir? Brother, same story. Here also program execution starts by main method, controlling by main method and stop by main method. Same story. Now I am going to show you how it will execute. Now I am going to show you how it will execute. Right. Whenever you run this application, the program execution starts by main method. Then C1.M1 you are calling. C1 is the class name, method name is M1. Then control will go to C1 class and will go to M1 method, will execute. Once it is encountered the closing brace, again it will come back. Then C1.M2, C1 class and will go to M2 method, will execute and go back, come back. And once it is encountered the closing brace of the main method, once it is encountered the closing brace of main method, the program execution is completed. The program execution is completed. So that is called what you know. So this is called object-oriented programming approach. So a programming language, listen, a programming language, programming language, programming language, which will follow the above approach, above programming approach, above programming approach is called as object-oriented programming language. Is called as object-oriented programming language. So example for object-oriented programming languages is C#.NET, especially C#.NET and Java, C++, and so on and so on. So now I can show you. Every day we are writing C# code also. Now I'll show you. You can see here class C1 and we define a method here. So what is this internal? Don't ask me. Static void M1 console dot write line. M1 is calling some message. M1 is calling some message. M1 is calling some message. Next I am defining one more method, class C2 and internal static void M2 I am writing just M2 like this. Yes. So right here, small statement here, console dot write line. M2 is calling, M1 is calling, M2 is calling. Right. You can observe. C1 class contain M1, C2 class contain M2. or else no sir, I will write entire two methods in the same class. You can write, you can observe. C1 class contain M1 and M2, and here you have a program class. No sir, I will change it as C2. Your wish, same as your structure. You can change. Now you can see, you can call C1 dot M1, C1 dot M2, and console.readline. Now you see how it will execute. Whenever you run this application, what will happen? You see compilation, again execution, compilation, again execution. Now your output is like this. What happened? Program execution starts from main method. First C1.m1, control will go to C1 class, will execute M1. Here it will give you M1 is calling. Get this output. Then after this, control will come back C1.m2. Control will go to C1 class, will execute M2. Here it will statement will print M2 is calling. And once it is encountered closing brace, it will come back and console.readline. And this console.readline is holding the command prompt window. Is holding the command prompt window. Yes. Understood all of you. Are you clear? Right. Understood all of you. Here are all of you. Understood. Right. So that is the story. This is called, this is the way we can say that your C#.NET is called as object oriented programming language. Object oriented programming language. Your C#.NET is a object oriented programming language. Your .NET is a object oriented programming platform. Your ASP.NET is a object oriented technology. So C#.NET is a object oriented programming language. Due to that reason, as part of C#.NET learning, every C#.NET student should learn OOPS concepts. OOPS should learn object oriented programming concepts, and as well as every Java student, C++ student also should learn object oriented. Then what about Python, sir? What about Python? Can you tell me Python is a object oriented language or procedural oriented language? Can you tell me Python is a object oriented language or procedural oriented language? What is Python? Can you tell me? Both. Python will support both features. It will support object procedural oriented as well as it will support object oriented. Remember this point. So it will support procedural oriented as well as what is that? Object oriented. Remember this point. Yes. Right. Understood all of you. Right. Next to come back to our discussion. Everybody are clear? Clear about this. Right. Now come back to our discussion. What we need to understand. Next point is object-oriented programming principles. Next, object-oriented programming principles means OOPS principles. OOPS principles, object-oriented programming principles. What we can say, every object-oriented programming language should follow below principles. They are called as OOPS principles. Number 1, encapsulation. Number 2, abstraction. Number 3, inheritance. Number 4, polymorphism. Number 4, polymorphism. Number 1, encapsulation. Number 2, abstraction. Number 3, inheritance. Number 4, polymorphism. Number 4, what is that? Polymorphism. What I am telling you, every object-oriented programming language should follow the below principles. These principles are called as OOPS principles, right? So what I'm telling you, what are the OOPS principles? If anybody will ask, what you can answer. What are the OOPS principles? If anybody will ask, what you can answer. Come on, tell me. What are the OOPS principles? If anybody will ask, what you can answer. Come on. Right. What you can say? Encapsulation, abstraction, inheritance, and what is that? Polymorphism. These are all called OOPS principles. Right. Now come back to our discussion. Come back to our discussion. To achieve the above four principles, achieve the above four OOPS principles, every object-oriented programming language, achieve above four principles, every object-oriented programming language should follow below two concepts. Programming language should follow below two concepts. Below two should depend. To achieve the above four OOPS principles, every object-oriented programming language should implement below two OOPS concepts. OOPS concepts. Number one, class. Number two, object. Number one, class. Number two, object. Can you tell me what are how many OOPS concepts we have? How many OOPS concepts we have? Come on, tell me. How many OOPS? OOPS principles are four. OOPS concepts are two. OOPS concepts are two. Right. Number one, what are the OOPS concepts? First, number one, class. Number two, class. Number two is what? Object. Are you clear? Number one, class. Number two, object. So, for today, it is a first demo class. Now we are stopping here. Tomorrow onwards will take 1 hour exactly. Now we will start tomorrow from class. What is class? So from there it will start. Almost tomorrow also it will take theory. Day after tomorrow programming is going to start. So don't miss a single session. If you are missing single session also, you are the loser. By day after tomorrow, OOPS coding is going to start. Once OOPS coding is started now, you will enjoy your learning of 7:15 to 8:15 am. You are doing control statements. Maybe tomorrow data types will finish and one day typecasting. Then we will start control statements. There it is control statements. Here it is OOPS simultaneously. Understood all of you? Hello. Clear, Babu? Understood all of you. So how did you enjoy the classes? 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 Right. So if anybody want to pay for advanced.net, just ping me in WhatsApp. Ping me in WhatsApp. Once I will confirm, then only you do the payments. Ping me in WhatsApp. Okay, WhatsApp 9866193194, and I want to join. So once I'll give you the confirmation for the same number, you will have the Google Pay.